Hello, my name is Joshua Cates, and today I'm going to be giving my presentation for Psychology 864. My presentation is all about feminism and feminist movements, and in particular, I'm going to be talking about support and opposition for the Me Too movement. I'm going to be explaining some social psychological reasons as to why people support or oppose the Me Too movement. So without further ado, let's get started. So, before we get too far, I'd like to talk about some background. And I think important background in order to understand Me Too is to understand what is feminism. That's a question that has baffled many scholars for a long time. Feminism itself and feminist movements and feminists are difficult terms to define. Part of the issue stems from the fact that feminism is so complex and multifaceted. Essentially, scholars have these slightly different definitions of feminism, and because it's so complex, some scholars choose not to define it in the first place, thinking that by boxing it into a category, they're going to be doing it a disservice. In addition, some scholars contend that feminism is so complex that no one definition is able to capture every aspect of it. Feminism, however, is generally about gender parity, meaning that it's about women and men having equal opportunities. So, feminism has existed for a long time. Women have been battling for equal rights for hundreds of years, and I think that's really evidenced by the fact that there's this book which came out in 1405 called the Book of the City of Ladies, in which Christine de Pizan talks about women's need for a separate space where they can be equal to men. So feminism has evolved over time and it's changed a lot. You hear a lot of people talk about different waves of feminism, and some people would contend that we have now entered into a fourth wave of feminism. In addition, there are different movements that have been popular depending on the zeitgeist of the time. So, for example, Me Too is very prevalent nowadays, although some would argue that we've now entered a post Me Too age. My point is that feminism and feminist movements have changed over time. With that being said, there are some, mainly members of the media and lay public, that believe that feminism is now dead. For example, an article published by Time magazine in 1998 was titled, "Is Feminism Dead?" Clearly, that begs the question of why people think that feminism is dead. Now, the reason why people think that feminism is dead is that, particularly among young people, there is believed to be a lack of visibility and popularity of feminist movements. This couldn't be more far from the truth. Indeed, some scholars like Poser have referred to this phenomenon of considering feminism dead as the false feminist death syndrome. Essentially, feminism is alive and well, and I think that's really evidenced by the Me Too movement. Now, what exactly is the Me Too movement? I think a lot of people forget this, that the Me Too movement wasn't created in the last couple of years. The term Me Too was originally coined by Tarana Burke in 2006. It was in 2017 when actress Alyssa Milano tweeted about Me Too that the movement really caught fire. Essentially, before that, it was around, but people hadn't really recognized it as its own movement until this point. Now, what exactly is Me Too? Me Too is a mechanism to discuss sexual violence. So essentially, women and men use the hashtag and say, "Me too, I have experienced sexual violence in my past." And I think something that's really important to highlight is that Me Too isn't just about calling out specific individuals. For example, Harvey Weinstein has been obviously called out for his actions on account of Me Too. However, it's also about discussing sexual violence and having open commentaries and dialogues about it. In addition, and I've already alluded to this, Me Too has served as a voice for both women and men. I think that a lot of people forget that as well. In particular, I would like to reference Terry Crews, who, although he is problematic for nowadays for some of the comments he made with regard to Black Lives Matter, did originally come out and say that he had experienced sexual violence from, I believe, a producer. So, Me Too has served as a voice for both women and men to discuss sexual violence and acts of it. So, now that we've talked a little bit about feminism and the Me Too movement, I feel it's time to move into the topic of my presentation, which is on why people support or oppose the Me Too movement and feminist movements more generally. An important thing to keep in mind is that I'm going to be trying to talk about social psychological reasons for why people support or oppose Me Too. As such, and because this is a semester long course, I feel like it would be inappropriate to talk about theories that are probably going to be covered in other weeks. So I'm going to try to highlight some of those theories that I think are not going to be talked about as much. And in reading the articles on why people support Me Too and feminist movements or oppose them, I realized that there was a lot to talk about, and I can't possibly contain it all within a 45-minute presentation. So I'm also going to pick and choose, and I'm going to talk about some of the theories and rationales that I find particularly interesting. So, with that being said, system justification theory.